Hey everybody, welcome to another World of Tanks replay. This one's on Sacred Valley in the T30. Now I might be stopping and starting this replay a bit to just point out various things that are happening, because obviously if I run it in real time I'm not going to have enough time to speak as much as I'd like to on certain things that are going on in the match. So, I'm in a good hull-down tank destroyer with a big scary gun. There's really only one correct course of action here for me, which is to head up to the northwest corner and try and block the enemy from pushing that past. Oh, sorry, pushing the pass. Words are hard. There's still not really any reason to go south on this map, unless the enemy have such a convincing block up north that you can get through there relatively unimpeded. The terrain in south is just not really very good for fighting in, and particularly in a standard battle match rather than counter match, there's no objective down there, so there's no real point. Sometimes it can work, particularly with medium and light tanks. If you manage to get them in under the bridge, you can proxy spot people and just make yourself a nuisance, but in a relatively slow, big tank destroyer, there's no reason to go down there, particularly because about 2/3 of my team has gone there. We can tell already that this team is not the best, and interestingly our comment said that the team was like a bag of Skittles at the start. Funny how one of the worst players on the team always is the first one to point out that it's a bad team. I will never cease to be amused by that. The Lorraine stops and lets me take the corner first. Not surprising, honestly I would do the same thing. The T30 is much better at handling this corner than a Lorraine is. The enemy Type 59 gets up to my right side. I'm a little worried about that, but I'm fairly confident the tanks behind me will stop him from pressing on my side. And I go for a shot on the Black Prince here, change my mind to the Super Pershing, change my mind back to the Black Prince, and in the process throw any chance of getting an actual damaging shot in here. Don't shoot the gun manlet of a Black Prince. Even with a T30, it will not end well. We've now got an ST1 on the corner. Now this guy is bad, and you'll see over the course of this game, he is like the ultimate heavy tank driver. The Sturr Emil thinks better of popping up in front of a 155mm gun, however the Super Pershing doesn't and rolls out showing his lower plate. Of course the lower plate of a Super Pershing is no match for the T30's gun, and I'm able to punch happily through it. ST1 pushes in front of me. I am not going to complain about that. He has much better armor all over than I do, including the turret, as I mentioned before. My next shot at the Black Prince unfortunately whiffs into the snow. I'm not certain how it managed to hit the snow instead of the Black Prince, but it did. And I bounce a shot from the T32. We got things pretty much in hand up here. The southeast corner is a lot more spread out, but that's not my concern at the moment, so I wasn't really worried about it. I was focusing on getting my job done up here. Super Pershing's down to 3 hit points. A stiff breeze will kill him. If somebody hits him with HE even, it might, although firing HE at Super Pershings is even riskier than firing HE at anything else, because of course spaced armor basically nullifies its effect. Managed to get a rack on the Sturr Emil. Not that it would have mattered, I probably would have killed him in one shot anyway. Well, I certainly would have actually. He only had 440 hit points. And the ST1 pushes up to engage the enemy ST1. Unfortunately, he rolls back as soon as he shoots, which encourages the enemy ST1 to engage me, and I start losing hit points. However, because I am firing downhill with a very good amount of gun depression, I'm able to get a shot through his upper plate at an angle that actually pens it. So although he might have some of the best frontal armor in the game, it's very effectively reduced by the fact that I'm fighting him from above. I wait for him to shoot RST1 before rolling out to put another shell into his lower plate. At this point he's one-shottable for RST1 and for the IS-6, so I'm quite happy to turn and head towards the middle of the map. Lorraine is in trouble here, or at least he says he is. There's a T32 coming up this route, and there's a Leopard hanging around there somewhere as well, so I decide to go help him out, since I can wipe out almost all of the T32's hit points in one shot. He pulls back to let me past. I was hoping the T32 would roll around the corner, but he obviously realised he was being baited there. He proxy lit me as he came around, and so he backs into a little alcove here. I'm not afraid to take one T-32 hit to get one of my shells in, which is exactly what happens. And now I want the Lorraine to pull up in front of me and take the next hit to finish the T-32. And this is actually something I want to talk about. First of all, the Lorraine is too busy typing, arguing with somebody else on our team, to actually go out and finish the T-32 before the Leopard takes interest in the situation. So now the Leopard is supporting the T-32, whereas previously it was engaged with something else. Now the Lorraine is reluctant to go. He sits and hides behind me, and as I pull back, he also pulls back. He rolls out and takes a hit. That hit right there got him killed. Instead of rushing the one-shottable T-32, firing one shot as he passed, blazing down, and he probably wouldn't have taken a hit in that situation, he would have got away with it. Instead of doing that and then taking a passing shot at the Leopard and running away, he rolls out, hesitates, gets shot without firing back at the T-32, and let's see what happens. He rolls out a second time to get another shot. He does finish the T-32. I waste my shot, which I wouldn't have done before if he'd just run out there, and then he gets killed by the Leopard. Watch chat. As the Leopard runs away to engage somebody with a bit smaller of a gun than I have, he says, "I'm trying not to die like that idiot." The reason that he died like that is because he rolled around the corner, didn't fire his gun, and took a hit from the T-32. Hesitation gets you killed. You need to roll out and finish the enemy as quickly as possible. And as I said there, he should have rushed the T-32. He would have been alive still if he hadn't hesitated. Things are looking pretty grim for us at the moment. So I carefully roll around the corner, look for a shot on any of these guys. I tried not to take damage so I wouldn't die from the Leopard, says the Lorraine. Well, fat lot of good that did him, because his efforts not to take damage ensured he would take damage. The way he rolled out and rolled back without taking a shot, of course he was going to take a hit. I'm able to finish off the Tiger. It's the easiest target of them all. There's no point exposing myself any more than I have to, and as long as I'm taking a gun out of the fight, it doesn't really matter which gun it is, at least for now. I'm aiming in to finish the pattern when the Rheinmetall gets spotted with just enough hit points to survive an average roll from me. Unfortunately, I low roll. In fact, that's nearly a minimum roll for the T-30. Had I high rolled, I would have one-shot him, which would have been very nice and saved me, but I'll take what I can get at the moment. We still have an ST-1 with a lot of hit points, and my gun is still in the fight, at least for now. Start looking for shots on the Patton or the Rheinmetall, whichever rolls out of cover first. The ST-1's kind of bumbling around in the open. You'll get to watch his stellar gameplay in a moment, once I get blown up. Conscious of the fact that there is a Lorraine pushing in from the south, I pull back into the cover of the houses here. I don't want to be shot from the bridge while looking for shots on the Patton. I wanted to get one into the ST-1 here. STA-1. I was very worried that it was going to finish our ST-1, and indeed it probably would have had I not got this shot off, because our ST-1 is just horrifically bad. The STA stops, hesitates, looks like he was trying to take a shot at me, and it gets him killed. The Lorraine begins firing. Very luckily for me, I'm able to get away and try and bait him into wasting his remaining shots, knocking down my cover. Now he's going to hold his fire, he's not that stupid. And so I roll back behind the house, manage to spot him, and finish him off. The Rheinmetall is right next to me. He's using the 15cm gun. His heat shell gets eaten by a wall. Obviously nobody told him that heat does not go through walls. Had he been using the 128mm gun, or had he even fired AP from the 15cm, that would have killed me. I roll around the corner, I snapshot, we both fire at the same time, and both kill each other at the same time. This now leaves our ST-1 to face off against the enemy M46, who at last sight had 94 hit points. this guy could be firing HE and still be able to kill the Patton. Not that I'm condoning the use of HE. Watch this guy play. He's sitting in the complete open, the most open ground he can possibly find on the map. He's just sitting there. He doesn't know what to do. You can tell he doesn't know what to do because he's just driving back and forth aimlessly. He doesn't have any kind of master plan. To complicate matters, our bad Lorraine now begins trying to coach him, having been trying to coach me earlier while I was doing my utmost to carry this team. Honestly, I really wish that the ability to speak after your own tank gets blown up was dictated by your ability to play the game, because people like this Lorraine only make it more likely that games will be lost. His constant backseat driving was distracting me while I was trying to carry, and I certainly didn't need bad advice from him, and now he's giving bad advice to our ST1, who is obviously in dire need of all the help he can get. I tell our ST1 he's being kited by the Patton. It's trying to draw him around this rock to either hit him in the side or pull out behind him. Obviously it's a medium tank, it has the mobility to just Benny Hill him around this rock and catch up with him. So I tell the ST1 to turn back the other way, which he actually does. Unfortunately, he doesn't begin pursuing the Patton around the bottom of the rock, he just stops and then starts rocking back and forth, spinning his turret around. No, this is not a bot, this is actually a human player. That's the most depressing thing. I tell him to watch his left and push out around the bottom. Watch left so that if the Patton is trying to chase him, it will eat a shell to the face. Of course, he's wasted so much time dawdling around at the north end of this rock that the Patton's probably fucked off across the map by now. When you're fighting a lone medium tank in a heavy in a situation like this, you cannot waste time because time is distance. The medium will flank around you like that, pop up from the other side of the map, and oh my good lord, what the fuck is this guy doing? How is that for reaction time? I honestly thought we had lost at this point. I was just sitting here in disbelief watching this ST1 throw the game. He does barge straight in towards the Patton and thankfully bounces its next shot while finishing it off with a snapshot. We're very lucky to have won that because this ST1 did everything he possibly could to lose the game, basically. Unbelievably bad, and yet he ends up with 5 kills, same as I got. I think he got a pretty decent amount of damage too from memory. Now, this ties in with something I'd like to bring up, which is the ongoing efforts of Wargaming to nerf gunpen at tiers 9 and 10, particularly from medium tanks. The reason they're doing this is to try and make heavy tanks relevant again, air quotes. Heavy tanks have always been relevant and always will be relevant, while no doubt the medium tank is the best thing for winning a game, because it's the best thing for shoring up failing flanks. It doesn't necessarily make it objectively better than a heavy. In many situations a medium tank would be useless where a heavy tank would not. The problem is, and this is a big problem, and I think my previous 2 videos have evidenced this, as well as several of my World of Warships videos, particularly ones where I'm using torpedoes. Heavy tank drivers in World of Tanks, and by extension battleship drivers in World of Warships, are the absolute lowest form of life on planet Earth. They are unbelievably stupid. The limit of their cognitive function is throwing together half-legible sentences on the official forums, screaming about the fact that a medium tank was able to kill them as they sat in the middle of an open field in their E100, thinking that their invincible Kruppstahl would protect them from the feeble enemy shells. These people are hopeless. Now, I'm, of course, glossing over the fact that there are some phenomenally good heavy tank drivers, and the much maligned E100, if you've ever seen somebody like Anfield play it, or Nevzing, since he learned from Anfield, it is quite a strong vehicle when it's used well. It's all about angling, positioning, knowing where to keep your turret pointed, knowing who to use your gun on. It's not a bad vehicle. The problem is that the E100 gets a bad rap because, by and large, the worst players in the game drive it. Now, I like to work this in with another theory of mine, which is that the worst players in the game tend to also be the kind of people who believe in the invincible Wehrmacht and watch too many bad documentaries, I hate to use that word to describe these programs, but they get the impression that the German tanks were basically invincible, and so if they drive their German heavy tank into the middle of an open field, nothing will be able to hurt them. When this is disproven in spades, they run crying to the official forums that everything that isn't a heavy tank is overpowered, heavy tanks need a buff, also there's Russian bias because German tanks were never penetrated in combat, or some bullshit like that. Quite apart from the fact that if you look at any objective historical source, an IS-2 versus a Tiger at any kind of range, the IS-2 would generally trounce the shit out of the Tiger, unless the Tiger had some serious supporting arms. Turns out that putting the biggest tank gun of World War II into a well-armoured tank with well-sloped, ballistically optimised armour faces, better option than just slapping an anti-aircraft gun in a box. But I digress. Heavy tank drivers are just incredibly bad. They have reflexes measured in minutes, not in milliseconds. They have no tactical awareness. They don't even look at their map half the time. They'll push and shove in front of medium tanks or behind medium tanks, depending on how much fire is coming their way. They'll push mediums out of bushes to try and get in them. They will hide behind lower tier tanks and try and use them as armor. Just yesterday I had a blue E100, no doubt trying out for Chai, use my FV215B heavy tank as a blade of armor in an E100 in a city fight. They're just unbelievable. If I had to pick a single class of tanks that I just never want to play with on my team, it would be heavy tanks, because even suicidal light tank drivers are at least more useful than them, and because they're driving light tanks, you can always shove them out of the way if they're being an asshole. Heavies, on the other hand, act as if they own the game. They are just obnoxious, absolutely obnoxious. And battleships are exactly the same in World of Warships. They drive in a straight course at a constant speed and then scream blue murder when they get hit by a very predictable spread of torpedoes from a destroyer that they've been able to see for the past 2 minutes. It's just unholy how bad these people are. And unfortunately, they make up the bulk of Wargaming's player base, because everyone's attracted to the myth of the mighty German Tiger, or everyone's sort of won over by the idea of the Mouse, this gigantic brick of steel that, would get bogged down and sink turret deep into the mud if it was actually ever deployed in combat. And battleships are the same thing. I'll admit it myself. I'm very sort of attracted to the idea of this gigantic ship with 15, 16, 18-inch guns. They're fantastic things, very, very impressive, very powerful things. But the problem is, most people don't realise that they have weaknesses. Now, good heavy tank drivers and good battleship drivers in World of Warships realise that they have weaknesses, and they account for them. That's why they're good. But by and large, these people have no awareness of anything at all, and it's like they're just playing the game by rolling their face across the keyboard. In fact, ST1, I think, demonstrated very clearly that he was playing by rolling his face across the keyboard. And so I find it very deeply troubling that although they do make up the bulk of the player base, because they're drawn to the game by the idea of, the aspirational idea of playing these gigantic steel behemoths, Wargaming shouldn't be pandering to them as far as I'm concerned. Medium tanks maybe do need some looking at, particularly the tier 10 mediums and some of the newer tier 9 mediums. The power creep on the guns is a bit ridiculous, but the levels they're looking at nerfing them to, I think, is unwarranted. Particularly given the fact that a lot of the heavy tanks that are now added to the game are getting progressively stronger and stronger. Now, when the E5 was first added to the game, it was pretty much game-breaking. Compare that to the T57, compare it to the reworked IS-4, which isn't as strong as the IS-4 used to be at tier 9, but is pretty fucking difficult to fight. And compare it to, a lot of the newer tanks that are getting added. And while the newer heavies in particular may not have the best armor, they have really, really, really good guns. In many cases, the best guns in the game. The M62 and the gun whose name I can't remember, not T53, it's something else. The gun on the E5 and the M103, basically. Those are probably the two best guns in the game overall from any class of tank. And so I don't think heavies need help. I really don't. I think there are individual heavies that need some looking at. But by and large, as a class, I think they're okay. I think the biggest problem isn't that the mediums are too strong, I think it's just the generalized power creep, and I think if any class deserves a class-wide nerf, it's tank destroyers, because the tank destroyers are really the thing which just dominate every fight now because their guns are so powerful, and a lot of them have very thick armor. The Waffenträger E100 is the most egregious example of tank destroyer power creep. It is getting removed, it's getting replaced with basically a Panther chassis with, I think, the same gun on it. Oh, sorry, no, it's a long 15 centimeters. So it's going to be like basically a German BL-10, but it's not going to have an autoloader, so there is that. And it'll be on a Panther chassis, so it's going to have hideously bad camo, but it will have good mobility. But, I mean, the T-30 is a very solid tank destroyer. The E4, while it's quite bad compared to the other tier 10 tank destroyers and why I think it's a piece of shit, it still has a very powerful gun, a turret, its mobility isn't that awful, and its frontal armor is enough to defeat most pubbies, even if it's not enough to defeat somebody who knows how to aim. The E3 is just disgusting. The 268 is very good at brawling, probably more than it should be, and obviously the 183 and 4005, I don't think I even need to say anything with them. The JP 100, I think it's more or less fair. But we do have this situation where tank destroyers more or less dominate everything, because these maps are designed like Dota maps. They have generally 3 or 4 viable lanes, and so you're forced to go through choke points. And if you have enough tank destroyers on a team, you don't see it as often anymore, but on West it used to be like half a team of tank destroyers every match. They can just lock down those paths, and you can't get anywhere without losing tanks. So honestly, I don't see it. I don't see the need to nerf medium tank guns. If you're going to do anything, perhaps improving the gun handling of several of the heavies would improve them a bit, or, you know, touching up their mobility a bit, or giving them some other bonus that isn't the ability to shrug off incoming fire even more than they already can. Because, and I'm pretty sure I've touched on this before, this is balancing the game around the lowest common denominator, and when you balance the game around the lowest common denominator, you end up with the Hellcat, or the Covenanter, or the Leopard, or the STB-1, or any of these other tanks that are, or the Waffenträger E100 even. The Waffenträger E100, again, is probably the best example. Give a puppy one of those things, and yes, they'll probably do about 3 times their average damage in any other tier 10 in it, but they'll still be relatively useless. It's a big, relatively unarmored target, no camo, helpless for a minute while it reloads. Most puppies either shoot HE from them, or use the wrong gun, or are just hopelessly bad shots. So, you know, your average puppy in a Waffenträger E100, while he will perform better in it than his other tanks, he generally won't influence the outcome of a battle. But if you put a good player in a Waffenträger E100, like that replay of Polkas I uploaded about, probably would have been a year or so ago now, maybe longer, it's just filthy. It's absolutely fucking filthy. There's nothing you can do about it. It just mows down your whole team, you can't stop it. And it's absolutely disgusting. And could you imagine heavy tanks like that? I mean, IS-7s in good hands are already extremely annoying to fight. ST-1s in good hands are just disgusting because their armor is so good. T-110s, T-57s, AMX-50Bs, any of them in the hands of a good player will run just absolutely roughshod over an entire team without much trouble because they're balanced along the lines of the lowest common denominator. The Hellcat, another instance of a hideously broken tank in the hands of a good player that really couldn't perform in the hands of bad players. If you balance your game around the lowest common denominator, even though they may be the majority of players in the game, you're always going to have a smaller set of good players who can just take this thing and fuck the game with it. And that's not good balance, because it's not fun for the pubbies to play against, it's not fun for us to fight against. And it's actually a common held opinion by goons on the Waffenträger E100 in particular. When a tank is that overpowered, it's not even fun to play. It's just a chore, because it becomes formulaic. Kill 3 people, reload for a minute in the back of the map. Kill 3 more people, reload for another minute. It's just, there's no fun to it, there's no challenge to it. It's not exciting or interesting. And so I think that's part of the draw as well that low tiers have for a lot of good players, is that while you can beat up on people with no experience of playing the game, Low tier tanks have such a low hit point pool. On average, it takes, you know, like a tier 2 or tier 3 tank about 10 seconds to kill another tier 2 or tier 3 tank of continuous fire. Like, they can kill each other like that, the drop of a hat. So it really forces you to make good decisions and really ferociously guard your hit points, which is something you don't really face in higher tiers, outside of certain examples. So I think that's the draw that low tiers have for a lot of people. It's certainly the reason why I occasionally play them, other than go fast, shoot fast. If Wargaming want to do something about making heavy tanks more fun for the average puppy to play, then they should look at changing their map design. Because as long as the map design is Dota lanes, nerfing medium tank guns is going to hurt the game. Now, if they nerfed medium tank guns and made nice wide open maps with multiple paths, you know, all sorts of varied terrain and everything, it'd be fine, because medium tanks would regain the ability to flank. As it is, you can flank in medium still, but it's difficult, particularly if a team deploys very evenly across all the paths. It's very, very difficult to get through into a position where you can actually kill something. So you really need a more open map design where you can put your mobility to use, get in behind the enemy and shoot them from there, instead of having to wait for your team to break through a certain path before you can even think about doing anything. And that's the situation a lot of the lower tier mediums face, because their guns are obviously a lot less powerful for tier. Well, with that fucking lecture out of the way, I think I'll end this one here. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you've got any thoughts of your own on the issue of heavy tank drivers being the worst thing on earth, or Wargaming's constant attempts to rebalance the game, or, you know, what you think they should do to improve the general gameplay of the game, particularly in regards to the different classes and how they balance in regards to each other, I'd love to hear from it, so just add it in the comments. And in any case, I will see you on the next video.